I remember the exact day my life veered off course. The day the knock at my door felt heavier than the rent notice sitting on my kitchen counter. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden sunlight that should have made everything look warm and safe. But all I felt was dread. I hadn't paid rent in 2 months, and my savings were a shadow of what they'd been. When I opened the door, I didn't just see my landlord, Tom. I saw 2 other men standing behind him, unfamiliar yet strangely confident. Tom's smile wasn't cruel, but it wasn't warm either. He had that way of looking at you like he already knew your next move. "We need to talk," he said, glancing over my shoulder at my tiny, cluttered living room. The 2 men stayed quiet, their presence making my skin prickle. I knew Tom well enough to know he wasn't here to throw me out. Not yet. But the air between us felt different. I stepped aside, letting them in, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. Tom made small talk at first, asking about work, my health, how I was holding up. I gave vague answers, not sure where this was going. Eventually he leaned forward and said softly, "You're behind, but maybe we can work something out." The way he said it wasn't threatening, but it wasn't businesslike either. It was something else. Personal, almost too personal. Over the next few weeks, those visits became regular. Sometimes Tom would come alone, sometimes with one or both of his friends, who I later learned were contractors he knew from the neighborhood. At first, I told myself they were there to help with repairs. But the conversations kept drifting into my personal life. My loneliness, my failed relationships, the way I seemed to always be waiting for the right time to fix my life. It was dangerous territory, but I didn't stop it. There was a pull there, something in the way they paid attention to me when most people didn't. Tom started bringing small things, a bag of groceries, a lamp for the corner of my living room, once even a blanket because the nights get cold. It was thoughtful, but each gesture made me feel more tangled in something I couldn't name. The line blurred one evening when Tom came without the others. I had made tea, trying to be polite, but the conversation turned quiet. Too quiet. He reached out and touched my hand, just a simple contact, but it felt electric and wrong all at once. I didn't pull away. In that moment I told myself it was harmless, that I was just tired of feeling invisible. But deep down I knew better. That night after he left, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it over in my head. Not just the touch, but the way my chest had tightened, the way a small, hidden part of me wanted more attention, more validation, even if it came with strings attached. I had a boyfriend once who used to look at me like that, but we hadn't spoken in years. I wondered what he'd think if he knew. Things escalated in subtle ways. The conversations became more intimate. The visits stretched longer. When his friends were there, I noticed the way they watched me too, not in a crude way, but in a way that said they were part of something I didn't fully understand. And I let it happen. I told myself I was just playing along to buy time until I could catch up on rent. But the truth is, I liked the attention. It made me feel wanted. The breaking point came one rainy Saturday night. Tom came over with both friends, and we ended up talking for hours, laughing about stories from the neighborhood, sipping cheap wine from mismatched glasses. It should have felt casual, but under the laughter was this current of something unspoken. By the end of the night, I knew I had crossed into a place where my rent wasn't the only thing I owed. When I woke up the next morning, I felt sick. Not because anything explicit had happened, but because I knew I had been complicit in something that betrayed my own boundaries. I had let emotional closeness become a form of currency, and the shame was a weight I didn't know how to carry. A week later, I scraped together enough to pay 1 month's rent. I handed Tom the envelope, expecting relief, but instead, he gave me a look that said he knew we were past the point of simple transactions. "You don't have to disappear," he said quietly. I just nodded, too afraid to explain that disappearing was the only way I could breathe again. I moved out 2 months later, breaking the lease. My friends thought it was just because I couldn't afford the place, and I let them believe that. It was easier than admitting the truth, that I had gotten lost in a web of attention, temptation, and need. Even now, part of me wonders what would have happened if I had stayed. But most nights, I'm just grateful I walked away before I owed more than I could ever repay.